you probably wouldn't survive a single day in ancient Rome. No air conditioning, no phones, no coffee, just dust, noise, and the constant smell of sweat, animals, and empire. And yet, somehow, this harsh, chaotic world gave birth to one of the most influential civilizations in human history. Today, we begin a calm journey, from the dusty hills of a tiny kingdom, all the way to the bustling streets of modern Italy. Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll take you through the entire transformation of the Roman Empire into the Italy we know today. Slowly, gently, and without drama, just steady history that might put you right to sleep. But make no mistake, this story begins in fire. Let's rewind the clock. Not by decades or even centuries, but by nearly 3,000 years. Around 753 BC, according to Roman legend, a pair of twins named Romulus and Remus were abandoned in the wild and raised by a she-wolf. Yes, that's the official origin story. Romulus would eventually kill his brother, become the first king, and give his name to a small settlement, Rome. This wasn't an empire yet. It wasn't even a real city. Just huts on 7 hills near the banks of the Tiber River, a location chosen for its access to trade routes, the sea, and natural protection. Rome began as a monarchy, ruled by kings. But the people eventually grew tired of royal rule. In 509 BCE, the last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, was overthrown. From his fall, the Roman Republic was born, a new kind of government, where elected officials ruled, and power was shared among the elite. But shared is a generous word. Power was concentrated in the hands of the patricians, the aristocratic class, while the common people, or plebeians, had limited say. Still, this system created stability, and stability allowed Rome to grow. First, it conquered neighboring tribes. Then, it took over the entire Italian peninsula. Rome didn't just fight wars, it absorbed people. Conquered regions often became allies. Their soldiers fought for Rome. Their taxes filled Roman coffers. By the 3rd century BC, Rome was no longer just a city-state. It was a regional superpower, one now ready to clash with another rising force, AC Carthage. This conflict would become known as the Punic Wars, and it would shape the destiny of the Western world. But we'll get to that. For now, picture Rome. Bustling markets, senators in white togas debating in the Forum, roads stretching further each year, and temples rising to gods like Jupiter, Mars, and Venus. A republic, yes, but ambition was stirring. Ambition that would soon tear this system apart and set the stage for the world's most famous empire. Rome's hunger didn't stop at the Italian peninsula, and it was only a matter of time before it collided with another ancient giant. To the south, across the shimmering blue of the Mediterranean, stood Carthage, a wealthy, seafaring city in North Africa, founded by the Phoenicians, and powerful enough to rival any empire of the time. Their ships ruled the waves, their economy was booming, and their ambition matched Rome's in every direction. Inevitably, the two powers collided in what became one of the most brutal and significant conflicts of the ancient world, the Punic Wars. The First Punic War began in 264 BC, and though it started as a small dispute over Sicily, it quickly escalated into a long and costly naval conflict. Rome, with almost no navy to speak of, somehow managed to build a massive fleet in record time. They copied Carthaginian ships, trained thousands of sailors from scratch, and developed the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into infantry fights. Something the Romans were already very good at. After over 20 years of warfare, Carthage was forced to surrender Sicily, and Rome tasted the reward of overseas expansion for the first time. But it wasn't over. The Second Punic War, starting in 218 BC, would become legendary. It was during this war that the Carthaginian general Hannibal did the unthinkable. He marched an army, including war elephants, over the Alps into Italy. It was a military feat so bold, so impossible, that it shocked the Roman world. For over a decade, Hannibal ravaged the Italian countryside, winning battle after battle, including the disastrous Battle of Cannae, where tens of thousands of Roman soldiers were killed in a single day. But Rome didn't surrender. It never surrendered. Instead, it adapted. While Hannibal was busy in Italy, a Roman general named Scipio Africanus took the war to North Africa. In 202 BCE, Scipio met Hannibal at the Battle of Zama and finally defeated him. Carthage, once the jewel of the Western Mediterranean, was broken. Its empire collapsed, and Rome emerged as the new master of the seas. Still, Rome wasn't satisfied. The Third Punic War, a much shorter and more brutal campaign, came decades later in 149 BCE. This time, Rome wanted Carthage wiped from the map entirely. After a lengthy siege, Roman forces breached the city walls, destroyed Carthage stone by stone, and, according to legend, salted the earth so nothing could grow there again. Whether that part is true or not, one thing was certain: Carthage was gone, and Rome had no more rivals in the Western world. But success came at a price. With so much wealth flowing into the city from conquered lands, inequality began to grow. The rich became richer, land was seized, slaves replaced farmers, and the ideals of the old republic began to rot from within. Corruption spread, elections turned violent, and political gangs filled the streets. The Senate, once the symbol of Roman virtue, became a playground for the powerful. Into this chaos stepped the men who would ultimately destroy the republic, and one of them was Julius Caesar. But that story of ambition, betrayal, and the fall of democracy will begin in the next chapter. By the end of the Punic Wars, Rome was rich, vast, and utterly exhausted. Its enemies were gone, its treasury overflowing, and its borders stretched across continents. But inside the heart of the Republic, a storm was brewing. With so much power in the hands of so few, the people of Rome, especially the poor and landless, began to demand change. What followed wasn't peaceful reform. It was civil unrest, assassinations, and the slow death of the old Republic, all unfolding in public view. The first cracks appeared with the rise of the Gracchus brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, two tribunes who tried to reform the land system and give power back to the people. Their ideas were popular with the masses but dangerous to the elite. Both were killed, violently, by senators who feared losing control. Their death set a precedent. From now on, violence would decide politics in Rome. Then came the generals. Ambitious men like Marius, who opened the Roman army to the poor, and Sulla, who marched on Rome itself, began turning legions into private armies. Loyalty shifted from the Republic to individual commanders. Rome was no longer ruled by laws alone. It was ruled by those who could command swords. In this dangerous atmosphere stepped Gaius Julius Caesar, a charismatic politician, skilled general, and master of public image. Born into a patrician family, but deeply popular with the common people, Caesar quickly rose through the political ranks. He formed an alliance known as the First Triumvirate with two powerful men, Pompey the Great, a military hero, and Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. Together, they controlled the Republic like a private business. But alliances built on power are fragile. When Crassus died in battle, and Caesar grew too popular, Pompey turned against him. The Senate, fearing Caesar's ambition, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome alone. Instead, in 49 BCE, Caesar crossed the Rubicon River with his army, a direct act of treason, and marched on Rome. The phrase, "crossing the Rubicon," has meant the point of no return ever since. A brutal civil war followed. Caesar defeated Pompey's forces, chased him into Egypt, and returned to Rome as the unchallenged leader of the Republic. In 44 BC, he was declared dictator for life, a title that made many uneasy. Just a few weeks later, on the Ides of March, Caesar entered the Senate house and was stabbed to death by a group of senators, men he once called friends. Among them was Brutus, a man Caesar trusted like a son. The assassins claimed they were saving the Republic, but instead, they plunged it into more chaos. The power vacuum left after Caesar's death gave rise to another triumvirate: Mark Antony, Lepidus, and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. But even this new alliance couldn't hold. Eventually, Octavian turned on Antony, who had allied himself with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypt. Their forces clashed in the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, a naval conflict that ended with Octavian's total victory. With no rivals left, Octavian returned to Rome not as a dictator, but as something far more permanent. In 27 BC, he was granted the title Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. The Republic was gone. The empire had begun. But while Augustus brought peace, stability, and monumental reforms, he also created a system where power flowed through bloodlines and betrayal. And what followed were emperors both wise and utterly mad. When Augustus became the first emperor in 27 BC, Rome officially shifted from a republic to a monarchy in disguise. The Senate still met, elections still occurred, and traditions were kept alive, but real power now rested in the hands of one man. Augustus was careful not to call himself king, but his authority was absolute. And despite the fear of tyranny, his rule brought something the Roman world hadn't felt in generations: stability. This period is known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, an era that stretched for nearly 2 centuries. Under Augustus, and many of his successors, Rome expanded further than ever before, stretching from the misty forests of Britain to the scorching sands of Syria, from the Rhine and Danube to the riches of Egypt and North Africa. Roads, aqueducts, and cities were built across the empire, all connected by Roman law, Roman coinage, and the Latin language. But power, once centralized, is hard to control. After Augustus died in 14 CE, the emperors who followed varied wildly in ability and temperament. Some were wise and capable. Others were disasters in human form. Tiberius, Augustus's stepson, ruled with paranoia and increasingly withdrew from public life. His later years were spent in isolation on the island of Capri, where dark rumors of cruelty and secrecy spread like wildfire. Then came Caligula, his great-nephew, a name that still echoes with madness. Known for his extravagant spending, erratic behavior, and cruelty, Caligula once allegedly made his horse a priest, and perhaps even a senator. Whether legend or truth, the message was clear. Rome now belonged to emperors who saw themselves as gods. He was assassinated by his own guards in 41 CE. His uncle, Claudius, took over unexpectedly and shocked everyone by ruling with surprising intelligence, expanding Rome into Britain and reforming its bureaucracy. But after his mysterious death, many believe he was poisoned. His stepson took the throne, Nero. Nero's name still evokes fire. Literally. In 64 CE, a massive fire swept through Rome, destroying much of the city. While historians debate whether Nero started it or not, what's known is that he blamed Christians, a relatively new and small religious sect at the time, and began brutal persecutions. Nero fancied himself a musician and actor more than a statesman, and his leadership spiraled into cruelty, economic chaos, and violence. Eventually, even the Senate turned against him. As soldiers closed in, Nero took his own life in 68 CE, reportedly declaring, "What an artist dies in me!" His death ended the Julio-Claudian dynasty, and chaos followed. In a single year, Rome saw 4 different emperors: Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian, a general who restored some order and began construction on one of Rome's most famous monuments, the Colosseum. Despite the turbulence, the Roman Empire held strong. Under the Flavian dynasty, and especially the 5 good emperors that followed, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, Rome reached the peak of its territorial size and administrative sophistication. But beneath the surface, slow changes were building. Enemies pressed on the frontiers. The economy strained. And a strange new religion, once outlawed, was quietly spreading through the empire, changing it forever. By the 2nd century CE, the Roman Empire stood at its height, vast and seemingly invincible. Its borders stretched over 5,000 kilometers, enclosing nearly a quarter of the world's population. Cities were connected by an astonishing web of roads, trade flourished across seas and continents, and Roman law held the diverse lands together. But no empire remains untouched by time. Beneath the surface of marble temples and disciplined legions, fractures were beginning to spread. One of the most subtle, yet powerful shifts was religious. Christianity, which began in the eastern provinces during the reign of Tiberius, had started as a small and often persecuted faith. Early Christians met in secret, misunderstood by the wider Roman public, and blamed for various disasters, including fires, plagues, and military defeats. Yet the more the authorities cracked down, the more the movement grew. Its message of salvation, humility, and eternal life appealed especially to the poor, the enslaved, and those disillusioned with Rome's harsh hierarchy. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor known for his meditations and Stoic ideals, the empire was already straining. Wars on the frontiers, especially against Germanic tribes, demanded more resources than ever. Plagues swept through cities, weakening both population and economy. After his death in 180 CE, his son Commodus took the throne, and his reign marked a dramatic decline. Commodus styled himself as a gladiator, fighting in the arena and demanding godlike praise. His rule was erratic, marked by fear, conspiracies, and lavish spectacles. He renamed Rome after himself, a symbolic gesture of arrogance. When he was finally assassinated in 192 CE, chaos followed. Civil war broke out once again, and generals across the empire declared themselves emperor. This period, known to later historians as the crisis of the 3rd century, nearly tore Rome apart. Between 235 and 284 CE, the empire saw over 25 emperors rise and fall, most meeting violent ends. Invasions from outside, economic collapse inside, plagues, and rebellions plagued every corner of the empire. At one point, the empire even split in 3, with separate emperors ruling in Gaul, the east, and Rome itself. To survive, Rome adapted. It centralized power even more. Emperors like Diocletian introduced radical reforms, dividing the empire into east and west, creating new administrative regions, and demanding tighter control over the economy and the military. He also launched the most intense persecution of Christians in Roman history, trying to restore traditional Roman religion as a unifying force. But the momentum of change could not be reversed. When Constantine rose to power after a brutal series of wars, he did something no emperor had done before. He embraced Christianity. According to legend, before the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 CE, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky and heard the words, "In this sign, conquer." After his victory, he issued the Edict of Milan, legalizing Christianity throughout the empire. Though paganism would continue for decades, Christianity now had imperial protection, resources, and influence. Constantine moved the capital of the empire eastward to Byzantium, a Greek city he renamed Constantinople. It would become the new center of imperial power, and a sign that the West was beginning to fade. The ancient traditions of the Roman Republic were long gone. The Senate held no true power. The city of Rome was no longer the beating heart of the empire. And outside the borders, new threats were gathering strength. Tribes that had once been pushed back were now learning Roman tactics, building alliances, and waiting for their moment. That moment was coming. By the late 4th century, Rome was no longer the unshakable giant it once had been. The empire, stretched across thousands of miles and burdened by endless internal struggles, was vulnerable in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few generations earlier. Wealth and strength had shifted eastward toward Constantinople, while the western half of the empire weakened. And outside Rome's borders, entire nations were on the move. Among them were the Goths, a Germanic people who had long lived near the Danube frontier. Pressured by the sudden arrival of the Huns, a fierce nomadic group from the steppes of Central Asia, the Goths sought safety within Roman territory. In 376 CE, they crossed the Danube and asked for asylum. The empire granted it, but poorly managed their settlement, mistreated their people, and sowed the seeds of rebellion. 2 years later, the inevitable happened. The Goths revolted and met the Roman army at the Battle of Adrianople in 378 CE. What followed was one of the worst defeats in Roman history. The Emperor Valens was killed, his army crushed, and the myth of Rome's invincibility shattered. Never again would Rome fully control its borders. In the decades that followed, waves of migrations, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent, pushed deeper into Roman lands. The Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, Ostrogoths, and others crossed rivers, mountains, and frontiers, settling within the empire, sometimes as allies, sometimes as invaders. They didn't seek to destroy Rome at first. They wanted to be part of it, but the system could no longer support them. The final blow came not with a single event, but a series of slow collapses. In 410 CE, the Visigoths, led by Alaric, did the unthinkable. They sacked the city of Rome. For 3 days, they looted the capital, something that hadn't happened in over 800 years. Though the empire survived the shock, its prestige was ruined. Then, in 455, the Vandals arrived and sacked Rome again. This time with even more destruction. The name, Vandal, would forever be associated with senseless ruin. Meanwhile, the Western Empire was barely holding together. Emperors were placed on the throne by military strongmen and removed just as easily. One by one, the provinces fell away. Britannia, once a proud Roman outpost, was abandoned. Gaul and Hispania fractured into barbarian kingdoms. And in 476 CE, the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, a teenager with little real power, was deposed by the Germanic general Odoacer. He didn't proclaim himself emperor. He didn't burn Rome to the ground. He simply sent the imperial regalia back to Constantinople and ruled Italy in his own name. That moment is often marked as the fall of the Western Roman Empire, but the truth is more complex. The city still stood. The Senate still met. Roman culture continued. But the age of emperors in the West was over, and the ancient world had come to an end. In the East, however, the empire endured. The Byzantine Empire, centered in Constantinople, would continue Roman traditions for nearly 1,000 more years. But Italy, the land that had once ruled the known world, was now a patchwork of kingdoms, tribes, and foreign rulers. And yet, the Roman spirit didn't vanish. Latin was still spoken. Roman laws were still studied. And the dream of unity, of a Roman identity, would linger for centuries, waiting to be reborn in a different shape. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 CE, Italy entered a long and uncertain twilight. For the first time in centuries, no emperor ruled from Rome. Instead, The peninsula became a contested prize, passed between foreign powers and local warlords, each claiming pieces of what was once the beating heart of a global empire. Yet the bones of Rome remained, its roads, its laws, its cities, and its memory. That memory would shape every ruler who came after. Odoacer, the Germanic general who deposed the last emperor, ruled Italy for nearly 2 decades. Though barbarian by birth, he governed much like a Roman, keeping the Senate intact, collecting taxes, and preserving Roman traditions. But his time in power came to an end when the Eastern Roman Emperor sent another general, Theodoric the Ostrogoth, to reclaim the peninsula in the name of Constantinople. Theodoric arrived not just as a conqueror, but as a king who admired Roman civilization. After defeating Odoacer in 493 CE, he established his rule over Italy and created what historians often call the Ostrogothic kingdom. He governed from Ravenna, not Rome, but maintained Roman laws, supported Latin literature, and even employed Roman administrators. In many ways, his court tried to revive the grandeur of the old empire, without the emperors. But it wasn't meant to last. In the 6th century, the Eastern Roman, or Byzantine, Emperor Justinian I launched an ambitious campaign to reconquer the West. His armies, led by the brilliant General Belisarius, invaded Italy in 535 CE, beginning a war that would drag on for nearly 20 years. The Gothic War devastated the peninsula. Cities were besieged, population slaughtered, and infrastructure destroyed. Though the Byzantines eventually took control, their victory left much of Italy in ruins. Soon after, another wave of invaders arrived, the Lombards, a Germanic people who seized much of northern and central Italy. The Byzantines managed to hold only a few coastal strongholds, like Ravenna, Rome, and parts of the south. Over time, the Lombards carved the land into competing duchies and kingdoms, many of which operated independently. The dream of a unified Italy faded further. Meanwhile, a new power was quietly rising to the north, the Franks. In 800 CE, the Frankish king Charlemagne was crowned emperor of the Romans by the Pope in Rome. It was a symbolic moment, an attempt to revive the Western Roman Empire under a Christian banner. But this new, Holy Roman Empire was not Roman in administration, language, or culture. Still, the title persisted, and for centuries, Germanic emperors would claim to be heirs of Caesar and Augustus, ruling over fragmented lands that included parts of Italy. In truth, the peninsula remained fractured. City-states, duchies, and foreign rulers competed for power. The papacy grew in strength, asserting control over central Italy and becoming both a spiritual and political force. Cities like Venice, Florence, Milan, and Genoa rose to prominence, each with its own government, army, and ambitions. The Middle Ages in Italy were marked by division, but also by rebirth. From the ruins of Roman infrastructure and memory, a new culture began to take shape. Art, science, trade, and philosophy stirred once again. Ancient texts were preserved and studied, often in monasteries or private libraries. Latin evolved into the early forms of Italian dialects. And in time, a flame would ignite in the cities of Italy, a flame that would light all of Europe. In the chaos of medieval Italy, something remarkable began to stir, something that didn't come from emperors, kings, or popes, but from merchants, scholars, artists, and thinkers. Among the crumbling walls of old Roman cities, a cultural awakening quietly took root. It wasn't planned. It didn't begin with a declaration. But by the 14th century, the peninsula that once ruled the ancient world was about to reshape the modern one. This movement would come to be known as the Renaissance. The word itself means rebirth, and in Italy, it was exactly that, a rediscovery of ancient Roman and Greek knowledge, art, and philosophy. It began in the wealthy city of Florence, where banking families, like the Medici-sponsored painters, poets, architects, and scientists. They weren't just funding decoration. They were fueling a cultural revolution. Artists such as Giotto, Masaccio, and later Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo didn't just imitate classical art, they transformed it. By the 16th century, the Renaissance flame had spread beyond Italy, sparking movements across Europe. But Italy itself began to stagnate politically. Spanish and Austrian rulers controlled large swaths of the land. The dream of a unified nation seemed impossible. Still, the legacy of Roman identity lingered. Even divided, Italians shared a language rooted in Latin, a history shaped by emperors and poets, and a geography dotted with ruins that reminded them of what had been. The idea of Italy, not just as a place on a map, but as a single nation, remained buried, quiet, and patient. It would take revolution, blood, and centuries of struggle to awaken it. By the dawn of the 19th century, Italy remained a land of fractured identities. Though people spoke variations of the same language, walked the same Roman roads, and lived among the same ancient ruins, they owed allegiance to different rulers. The north was under Austrian control, the south under the Spanish Bourbon monarchy, and the center, including Rome, belonged to the Pope. Borders cut through mountains, cities, and farmland, not just lines on a map, but barriers to progress and unity. Yet beneath the surface, a quiet idea had begun to grow. It wasn't born in palaces, but in cafes, newspapers, and secret societies. The idea was simple, yet radical. Italy should be one nation, free, independent, and ruled by Italians themselves. This vision became known as the Risorgimento, meaning resurgence or resurrection. It wasn't just about land, it was about identity, about reviving something that had once existed, not in the medieval kingdoms or city-states, but in the shared memory of Rome. The first sparks were lit by writers and thinkers. Giuseppe Mazzini, a fiery idealist, believed in a democratic republic and worked tirelessly to inspire revolution across the peninsula. He founded Young Italy, a movement that called on Italians to rise against foreign rule. While many of his early revolts failed, they planted the seeds of change in hearts across the nation. But ideas alone weren't enough. To turn hope into reality, Italy needed soldiers, strategy, and compromise. This came with two other figures, Count Camillo di Cavour and Giuseppe Garibaldi. Cavour, the prime minister of the Kingdom of Piedmont-Sardinia, believed in diplomacy and modernization. He forged alliances with France, improved infrastructure, and carefully expanded Piedmont's influence. Garibaldi, by contrast, was a folk hero and a warrior. He led volunteer armies dressed in red shirts and marched through the south, liberating cities from Bourbon control. In 1860, Garibaldi famously handed over his conquests to King Victor Emmanuel II of Piedmont, refusing personal power in favor of unification. It was a moment of rare humility in a century often dominated by conquest. By 1861, much of Italy had come together under one crown. For the first time in centuries, the word Italy referred to a single political entity, though many regions remained outside its borders, and deep divisions still existed between north and south. The unification was not complete, and the capital was still elsewhere. Rome remained under papal rule, protected by French troops. But that changed in 1870, when France withdrew its forces to deal with war at home. Italian troops entered Rome almost without resistance, and the city was annexed into the new kingdom. The Pope rejected the takeover, declaring himself a prisoner in the Vatican, a standoff that would last for decades. But for the new Italian state, the capital had returned to where it all began. Italy was whole. At least on paper. In truth, deep divisions lingered. The industrial north grew wealthy and modernized rapidly, while the agrarian south remained poor and neglected. Political instability, class struggle, and regional resentment simmered beneath the surface. Still, for the first time since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the peninsula was once again a single nation. But unity did not mean peace. A storm was coming, one that would reshape not just Italy, but the entire world. At the turn of the 20th century, Italy was a young nation facing challenges both old and new. Though unified politically, the country remained divided socially and economically. The northern regions, with their growing industries, railroads, and banks, raced toward modernization, while the south, often called the Mezzogiorno, struggled with poverty, illiteracy, and immigration. Millions of Italians left their homeland, seeking better lives in the Americas and other parts of Europe, creating a vast diaspora that still remembers its roots. Politically, Italy was unstable. Governments rose and fell quickly, often coalitions formed by competing parties that failed to address the needs of all citizens. Many Italians felt disconnected from their own nation. National pride coexisted uneasily with local identities. Venetians, Sicilians, Neapolitans, and others still clung tightly to their regional cultures and traditions. On the world stage, Italy sought to assert itself as a great power. It joined the Triple Alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary, but remained cautious in international conflicts. Italy's ambitions led to colonial campaigns in Africa, most notably the brutal conquest of Eritrea and Somalia, and later, a disastrous war in Ethiopia in the mid-1930s. Inside Italy, social tensions simmered. Workers and peasants demanded better conditions, land reforms, and political rights. Socialist and anarchist movements grew, clashing with conservative elites and the monarchy. The deep divides created fertile ground for radical ideas. After World War I, Italy faced economic hardship, unemployment, and a sense of betrayal. Though it was on the winning side, Italians called the outcome a mutilated victory, feeling that their sacrifices had been ignored in peace treaties. This frustration fueled resentment and unrest. Out of this chaos rose a charismatic and ruthless leader, Benito Mussolini. He founded the National Fascist Party, promising to restore Italy's greatness, order, and pride. Using propaganda, intimidation, and violence, Mussolini dismantled democracy and established a dictatorship by the early 1920s. His regime emphasized nationalism, militarism, and a revival of Roman symbol. Mussolini's ambitions led Italy into disastrous wars alongside Nazi Germany during World War II. Defeats, occupation, and resistance followed. In 1943, Mussolini was deposed and arrested. Italy switched sides to join the Allies. The war left the country devastated but also united Italians in rebuilding their shattered nation. In 1946, Italy abolished the monarchy and became a republic. It adopted a new constitution, committed to democracy and human rights, and began its path toward modernization and integration with Europe. From ancient Rome to modern Italy, the journey was long and tumultuous, marked by rise and fall, unity and division, glory and hardship. Today, Italy stands as a vibrant democracy, a guardian of history and culture, a nation still shaped by the echoes of its imperial past and the dreams of its people. After the establishment of the Italian Republic in 1946, Italy faced the enormous task of rebuilding a nation scarred by war, dictatorship, and division. The years following World War II were marked by intense social, economic, and political transformation. Refugees and displaced persons moved across the country, cities were reconstructed, and the economy struggled to recover from devastation. But despite these challenges, Italy embraced democracy and began to chart a new course. One of the most significant turning points came in 1957, when Italy became a founding member of the European Economic Community, the precursor to today's European Union. This decision marked Italy's commitment to peace, cooperation, and economic integration with its neighbors, leaving behind centuries of conflict and fragmentation. The Italian economy experienced what became known as the economic miracle during the 1950s and 1960s, with rapid industrial growth, improvements in living standards, and the rise of a consumer culture. Italian cities like Milan, Turin, and Rome transformed, becoming centers of fashion, design, and industry. The country produced iconic automobiles, such as Fiat, and renowned craftsmanship in furniture, textiles, and luxury goods. The arts flourished as well, with filmmakers like Federico Fellini and Michelangelo Antonioni gaining international acclaim, spreading Italian culture worldwide. Yet political instability persisted. Frequent changes in government, regional disparities, and social unrest challenged Italy's young democracy. The 1970s were especially turbulent, with acts of terrorism from both far-left and far-right groups, known as the Years of Lead, testing the resilience of the Italian state. Despite these difficulties, Italy remained a vital player on the global stage, balancing its rich historical legacy with modern ambitions. Its role within NATO, the United Nations, and the European Union reflected its commitment to cooperation and peace. Today, Italy stands as a country of contrasts, where ancient ruins and Renaissance art sit side by side with modern cities and technology hubs. It is a land shaped by centuries of history, from the rise of the Roman Empire, through empire and republic, division and unification, to democracy and globalization. The story of Italy is a story of transformation, resilience, and enduring identity. A journey that began over 2 millennia ago on the banks of the Tiber River and continues to this day. Italy's cultural influence has been nothing short of extraordinary. From the classical philosophies of Cicero and Seneca to the revolutionary art of Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, Italian contributions have shaped the foundations of Western civilization. The Latin language, once the tool of Roman administration, evolved into the Romance languages spoken by hundreds of millions today, including Italian, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. The Renaissance, which blossomed in Italian city-states, ignited a spark that spread across Europe, changing art, science, politics, and thought forever. Italy gave birth to humanism, placing human experience and reason at the center of intellectual life. This shift not only transformed cultural expression, but also challenged medieval worldviews and laid the groundwork for modern science and secular governance. Yet, Italy's journey was not merely about art and ideas. Its political evolution, from the Roman Republic to empire, through centuries of division, and finally unification, reflects a complex tapestry of power struggles, external invasions, and internal reforms. The endurance of Roman law and institutions influenced the development of modern legal systems worldwide, while the Catholic Church, centered in Rome, shaped religious and political landscapes across continents. In the contemporary era, Italy faces both opportunities and challenges. As a founding member of the European Union, Italy plays a critical role in shaping Europe's future. It is a leader in fashion, cuisine, automotive design, and the arts. At the same time, Italy grapples with economic disparities, demographic shifts, and political changes that continue to test its unity and identity. Through it all, the legacy of Rome, the empire that began as a small city-state on the Tiber River, remains a powerful force. Italy's streets, monuments, languages, and traditions all whisper stories of resilience, transformation, and the enduring quest to define what it means to be Italian. This long journey, from empire to republic, from division to unification, from ancient ruins to modern democracy, reminds us that history is never truly over. It is a living story, one that continues to unfold with each generation. Today, Italy stands as a nation both ancient and modern, a place where history breathes through every cobblestone and every piazza. The echoes of the Roman Empire still resonate in its laws, its language, and its culture, reminding Italians and the world alike of a civilization that shaped much of what we consider Western heritage. Modern Italy balances a rich cultural past with the challenges and opportunities of the 21st century. It is a democratic republic proud of its traditions in art, music, and cuisine, yet open to innovation and change. From the grandeur of Rome's Colosseum to the canals of Venice, from the vineyards of Tuscany to the fashion runways of Milan, Italy offers a vivid mosaic of history and life. The transformation from the Roman Empire to the Italy of today was neither simple nor swift. It was a journey marked by wars, invasions, revolutions, and renaissances. Empires rose and fell, borders shifted, and ideas evolved. But throughout it all, a unique Italian identity endured, born of shared language, culture, and an unyielding spirit. This story reminds us that nations are not static. They are living tapestries woven from countless threads of history. Italy's path from ancient Rome to a modern nation shows how the past can inform the present, and how resilience and adaptation are the keys to survival. As you walk through Italy today, whether amid ancient ruins or bustling cities, you are tracing footsteps laid down over 2 millennia ago. The legacy of Rome is not just in museums or textbooks. It lives in the hearts of the Italian people and in the continuing story of their land. And so, the journey continues.